All right. Waiting for picture here, and then we'll start up with Monday's episode. Here we go. And we are live. Let's see if we get some people showing up here. Whoa, the color is weird on this right now. Is there anything I can do about that? Probably not a lot. Pull a little bit of color out of there. Make it a little less bright. That might help. And I think we're good. There we go. What's up, Dave? Hey everybody, Jem Schofield here with the C47. It is Monday, March 6th, 2017. I apologize profusely for Friday's episode not occurring, and that was due to a production. I was down in the Princeton, New Jersey area, and I was strapped to an EASYRIG, or an EASYRIG was strapped to me with a Red Dragon, and it was a true Inception shoot. It was a C300 Mark II with a compact servo zoom shooting me with a Red Dragon with Otis 28, 55, and 85 millimeter lenses shooting somebody else who was talent using an iPhone and the ZEISS EXO-Lens series. It was psychotic. What's up? ICE from London. So here we are, and it is a new week. So again, I apologize for that. Let's get the business out of the way. I'm Jem Schofield. My website is thec47.com, though most people will probably hang out right here at this YouTube channel. And I will be doing a lot of live streams, and if you want to subscribe, just click on that logo there to the right of those little arrows, and you can do that. That way you'll get notified when I do live streams. We'll talk a little bit about the GH5. There's a question about that. We have talked a little bit about it in prior, episodes, and we will absolutely talk about this thing right here today, which is the newly announced, upgraded Blackmagic URSA Mini, which is called the URSA Mini Pro. So from what I recall, I think the other one was supposed to be a Pro model as well, but this is now the URSA Mini Pro. So better naming convention than some of the others. And that's a question for Dave about the GH5. Yeah, I think Dave's going to have a lot of viewpoints about the GH5, and I'm sure that'll get into his lab for testing, I would assume. Is it, Dave? Probably. I would think so. But we are going to be talking about this new Blackmagic camera. Now, Blackmagic did, in fact, announce more than just the URSA Mini Pro last week. They also announced 2 control surfaces for DaVinci Resolve. So they're now getting into that market, while I think a lot of people will still go the tangent route when they're looking at their control surfaces. I think it's nice to see that Blackmagic's doing that. Obviously, out of the gate, specifically, they want this to really be tuned to Resolve. We'll see how much they further develop that in terms of it being a good control surface for other applications out there. So Dave's looking forward to trying the GH5, I'm sure he is, and comparing it in many different ways in terms of color science and everything else. Speaking of the GH5, the boys over at cinema5d.com have recently done something. It's really Sebastian over there, related to the 8-bit, 10-bit functionality of the camera system, and some interesting findings there. Let's not forget that the GH5 is a $2,000 camera system, not a $20,000 or $40,000 camera system. So, you know, we can expect the moon when it comes to all of these new cameras, but I think the reality is that at somewhere along the lines, it's going to break. I see that little line that's over here. I can right there underneath the mic. It's just a piece of bounce board that you're not seeing very much. So let's now get into this Blackmagic URSA Mini Pro. And before we do that, as always, open forum for production questions about cameras, about lighting, and all of that stuff. People seem to be taking a little bit more advantage of this. I've been getting people visiting my website at thec47.com, filling out the contact form. I do also have a full equipment section on the website that you can check out with some recommendations. I did, in fact, see the article from Cinema 5D, and I think because we're on a 30-second delay to make sure there aren't any issues with this, sometimes I see your questions come in, and I may have already talked about something. That happens a lot, even in the classroom for me. So let's talk about this. So Blackmagic URSA Mini Pro. So what is this camera? Well, form factor-wise, it is exactly the same size as the Mini Pro. I've shot with that camera. It is, in theory, the same sensor. That's what I've heard. And it has potentially been tuned a little bit. I don't know how much the color science has changed. But the big differences in this camera system are, number one, a smaller screen to accommodate. Number two, a lot more buttons on the outside of the body. And then number three, adding ND filters. I would say that those are three big ones. Functionality is the big thing here with this particular camera. It's taking this... Where's the beard, Joe? Where have you been? This beard's been gone for a while. My wife's birthday, Valentine's Day, she hates the beard. It was going to go for a little while. It's coming back later on. Don't you worry about it, kid. Yeah, Alfonso, there's a lot of feelings about the Cinema 5D article. I'm not going to weigh in on that right now. Yet. Because, to be quite honest, I don't have a GH5. So for me to say something for or against their approach, which is a consistent approach for all the cameras they test, is not my place at this moment. I'll let other people do that. I got other things to worry about. Blackmagic URSA Mini Pro. Lots of controls, lots of buttons, lots of dials. So now we take this away from kind of being a camera system that I think pushes you into the realm of, in some ways, a larger crew, because you're relying upon other people to do certain things. Well, at least with the first model that I used, which was a production model, the biggest frustration, which was pre the whole user interface and software changing, was that I couldn't get to certain things without putting the camera down. So if I wanted to make changes to white balance and other things in the camera, I had to put the camera down. And I didn't want to sit there and flip out a screen and start messing through stuff. So I actually like this change. In fact, I think it's a big change. Lens mount wise, also pretty interesting. Standard EF mount in terms of stuff. I'm just checking out these comments. I think we've covered most of those. Standard EF mount makes a lot of sense. I think it makes sense that we and still have an optional PL mount and then a B4 mount. So if you're using some of those lenses that were designed for 2/3 inch chip sensor cameras, you can use those. I think the biggest gotcha when it comes to using those lenses is just resolving to these higher resolutions. So it really just boils down to the glass. What glass is there? And then you can test that and see how well it's holding up in terms of being able to use those lenses. And what else do we have here? Well, I would say that another big one here is this whole... We've got 2 CFast slots. We've got 2 high-speed SD card slots. And we also have an SSD slot. So what does that mean? Well, it means 2 things, depending on how you look at it. The first thing it could mean is that you just have lots of recording options, and you don't get to use all of them depending on how you're using the camera. So ProRes, you can fall back on and use the SD, but when you want to go into recording RAW, then you are going to have to use a different option. The second way to look at it is confidence or lack thereof in terms of recording with the camera system. And I've said this once, and I'll say it again. You know, Blackmagic is a company that doesn't necessarily approach support in the field as a regular camera company would. So the more, I guess, redundancy you have in the camera system overall, possibly the better, because if you're relying upon one recording mode in the camera and it goes down, you don't necessarily and can't necessarily fall back on the same type of support system that exists with companies like ARRI and Canon and Sony. They sort of have systems in place for professionals who are out in the field where you can get replacement cameras quickly and easily. They could be thought to be more readily available. So I think that you know, you can look at it a few different ways. You know, pre-ordering this stuff, if you've used the original URSA Mini, then I think you kind of understand what that sensor is giving you, and hopefully they continue to improve that as time goes on in terms of the color science of the camera, and retain what they had before, because nothing's more frustrating than picking up and trying to match a new camera with an old camera which has the same sensor. So that's important. I don't know if the URSA Mini Pro has waveforms or false color. I believe it has false color, but I'm not sure about waveform. Blackmagic historically has given you a histogram, and then you rely upon external monitors for your scopes or traditional scopes. So there you go. You know, I think that it's an interesting camera system when you look at it in reality, and we look at what this camera is giving us. You're getting a lot for your money, but all in, you know, for a workable camera system, sans or without batteries and lenses, you're looking at about $8,000 to $9,000 US. The electronic viewfinder is kind of essential, and it's a very nice electronic viewfinder. And the shoulder mount kit is relatively inexpensive for what it is. You can, of course, go with third-party options from Shape and Zacuto and other companies out there like Wooden Camera, and decide if that makes sense. Now, taking a look here, and that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to go ahead and take a look at the side of the camera. We can see that there are some, you know, big differences here between the original URSA Mini and the URSA Mini Pro. It's just, again, lots of buttons, lots of knobs, lots of switches, which makes, you know, using the camera as a single operator in a small to no crew production environment a lot easier. On-off switch right on the top of the camera body, so that's moved. ND wheel in the front there, 2, 4, and 6 stops with IR compensation, infrared, so you don't necessarily, we hope, get contamination. My question is, when you're on clear, and based on the sensor under certain lighting conditions, are there any IR contamination issues at all? I think that remains to be seen. Essentially the same sensor as the Mini, so we'll see what happens. And you can also see there we've got an ISO switch, a shutter switch, a white balance switch. There are programmable function keys here. We've got an F1 and F2. High frame rate button to access that quickly, and then also a dial at the top there, just to the left of where you see the ND writing, which is a dial that can be used for different things in terms of headphone, monitor, iris, and then using that wheel, and then of course being able to get into the menus and everything else. So to me, this is all a plus. It's a plus because anything that I can get to regarding a camera, you know, and its functions from the outside of the camera body without hunting and pecking in menus is a big, big plus for me overall. I think, you know, that this takes this camera system and it moves it into another category from where it was in the past. It takes Blackmagic's cameras and puts it into another category, and that category is a camera that can now at least be considered for the single operator. I don't know yet if I was comparing this camera to just a slightly more expensive PXW FS7. that I would go with this camera. I think that the obvious pluses here are the recording options, and the fact that you can do ProRes 4x4 all the way up to XQ is huge. That's not something we see in a lot of camera systems, and the ability to record at those types of codecs, with a sensor that has high dynamic range, wide color gamut, is important. And, this is obviously something that you have to consider when you are looking at this stuff. Now, Joe is asking a question about variable ND. It looks like Jeremy's already answered it, but basically no variable. The variable ND feature that's in the FS5 and FS7 Mark II is unique currently in camera to the Sony cameras. I think we'll see that change in the future, but right now that's what we're seeing in terms of stuff. And then we've already talked about media, and then in terms of in-out, that's the other thing that Blackmagic does well. We've got a 12G SDI out. That's going to be great when you're going to external recorders and things like that. Time code in and out, and it doesn't look like we have do we have gen lock? I don't think we have gen lock on here, but I do see reference in time code in. There might be another way to do it, but all in all, pretty great. Look at this thing and you'll see that it has almost all of the things that you would want in a self-contained camera system. The real question is whether or not it has what everybody needs in their workflows. And reliability is still a big question mark for me when it comes to Blackmagic cameras. You don't hear that the cameras are going down all the time, but at the same time, again, it's that support system and how much are you relying upon that camera for your production. So I think it's something to consider overall. There's nothing really about RAW overall that draws me in. I mean, I had a shoot last week where we had a red dragon, and the dragon that was sent to us was an older model, and it did not have ProRes recording as an option. If it did, I would have absolutely 1,000,000% gone with ProRes. For me, it's the gamma curve and the color gamut or expanded color space, which is more important to me, as long as I know that the recording data rate and recording option is high enough to retain enough of that information for the type of stuff I'm doing, then RAW doesn't really have a big draw to me. Now, that said, when it comes to RED, we are very oftentimes, pretty much all the time, dealing with compressed RAW, and we were shooting at a 10:1 ratio, so the files were smaller. But it still forces the editor to work in a proxy workflow and some other things. So it's a big pain in the buttocks. So that's kind of my overall feelings. I don't think it really digs much deeper than that. I mean, when I shot with the original URSA Mini, ergonomically, I was happy with it. I was shooting a little bit on the shoulder, and I liked the EVF and the placement of that. And then I was using my EASYRIG, and the combination of those two was good. So all pluses on ProRes, all pluses on adding the buttons and functionality. I think we have a good camera system here. Slap on a V-mount lock battery system or something equivalent, gold mount, and Bob's your uncle. So I think that's what we've got. So any questions or do you want any opinions additionally on the URSA Mini Pro, please fire away. We've got that. Totally agree. I'm more interested in the ProRes options than RAW on the URSA Mini Pro. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, let's just be real here. When we start getting into RAW land, the additional benefits of RAW, which are going to bake into a video signal, debayer and bake into a video signal at some point anyway, are relatively minute except for certain types of workflows. If we have high enough data rates in terms of recording, we have a big enough color space and dynamic range, then if we're shooting essentially with a log curve for dynamic range and we have enough color information being captured, and it's a rich enough image in terms of bit depth, then we're usually quite good in terms of what we can get done. So, you know, for me, I would say that log is giving me, and using something like ProRes recording or a high enough data rate in something like an FS7 Mark II or a C300 Mark II is giving me a rich enough image that I can push and pull that. In fact, last week we shot with the C300 Mark II and we shot with the original C100 Mark I. And while we were finding that grays and skin tones were rendering very similarly, the C100 Mark I was rendering blues quite differently than the C300 Mark II. So that made it a little bit of a challenge to match those two. The reality, though, was that the C300 Mark II is such a rich image that we can essentially go that direction and match that with the C100. Additionally, we found that on one of the takes where there was at least a little bit of information in there that we want to use, that there was a camera change in terms of the settings, and the C300 Mark II, thankfully it was that camera, was, I would say, 2 stops overexposed. But because we were shooting in, in that camera with a high enough data rate, we had a rich enough image that we were able to, with 10-bit 422 high data rate, get that image to where we wanted it to be. So that's important. All little things that contribute to all the big things when we're going over this stuff. So I am in psycho mode here this week. Last week was pretty psycho. This week is definitely psycho. So let's see if there's any questions here. I'll probably go for like another 8 to 10 minutes, depending on what people want to ask about or any particular camera, lighting, or general production questions. I'm happy to answer those. So if you want to fire those away. Wednesday's going to be a little tough for me. I've got to figure out how to do this one because I'm going to be in the city doing a presentation. And I don't know how I'm going to get an episode done. I will do what I can. It might be a later episode. And just a heads up, tomorrow, I don't know if it's going to be on my YouTube channel or it's going to be at youtube.com/camera, the word, and flask, F-L-A-S-K. At about 4 p.m. Eastern time, we are going to be doing a test for our new show. So I'll tweet, I'll put some stuff up on Facebook and also Instagram and I guess LinkedIn about that. That will be myself, it will be Ben Barden, and it will be Mr. Caleb Pike himself from DSLRvideoshooter.com. And it's just going to be a test. Do I have any experience with the Sigma Cinema zooms, the 18-35 or 50-100? Not the cinema modded zooms. I've used the standard stills. And to my knowledge, the biggest thing to look out for is you're going to get a very nice image out of those lenses, but they definitely breathe. And if you don't know what breathing is, it's when you're changing your focus, not your focal length, but your focus, and that plane of focus, and it looks like the lens is inhaling and exhaling, so it looks like it's getting larger and smaller, almost like you are changing your focal length. And when we take a look at high-end cinema primes and also zooms, we see very little breathing or no breathing in those lenses, so that's important. Picture's nice. I think that they, from what I've seen, match well with Canon glass in terms of the way they render color and stuff, and they are nice. And of course, Sigma makes some beautiful lenses with the art lenses. I'm partial to ZEISS lenses. I've been shooting with them for a long time. I like the look. I like the contrast. I like what I'm getting out of ZEISS lenses, and I think you get used to that over time. But that does not mean that that the Sigma lenses and other lenses from companies like Tokina are not pretty amazing. And in fact, I have been saying this for quite some time since last year. I think we're sort of in this golden age of glass. That sounds stupid, but you know what I mean. I think we're in this place where we're starting to see what occurred with camera systems now occur with lenses. I think that the lenses are starting to catch up to the cameras in terms of matching the features and price drops that have happened in that industry. And I think everybody's doing it. I mean, we've talked about this on a prior episode when we take a look at some of the stuff that's been done recently, some of those E-mount lenses for Sony camera systems, and the Fujinon 18 to 55 and the 70 to 200. You know, price point, is interesting stuff. So good point having one higher grade A cam and B cam. Yeah, I mean, matching cameras is one of our biggest problems. A number of years ago, I bought a Sony FS700, and I had already purchased a C100 Mark I. And I actually got the FS700 for a specific project that I was doing in Italy, and I needed off-speed recording. C100 Mark I did not give me what I needed for that. I preferred and still do prefer the image overall on the Cinema EOS cameras, but that was the right camera to get for that project. And it was a long enough production that it made sense in terms of an investment. But what wound up happening when I got back was I used that camera on another production or two and realized that the type of work that I was doing at the time, the type of work that I do largely now, is a lot of two-camera work, a lot of interview-style stuff, educational videos where I need two cameras, an A and a B, and the ability to have two cameras that matched was a huge bonus. And that makes and does have a huge effect in terms of post-production and how fast you can get to an image that you like in post. Joe can't stand the focus and zoom rings on the Sigma photo lenses. Did their design carry over to the cinema zooms? No, they didn't. It's a very different housing. It's on a standard 0.8 pitch in terms of the gears. It's a larger cine-style housing. So you don't have those issues. It's very, very different. And I know what you're talking about, and it's inconsistent from Sigma Zoom to Sigma Zoom, but it can be quite frustrating. It's almost sometimes like you're looking at when you buy a Nifty 50 and you've got that focus ring and it's teeny tiny and the placement of it. Not ideal for me either in terms of that, but I have to say that you're getting some beautiful images out of the art series of Sigma Primes, especially. I think that's what we've got at the moment. We are, I'm heading into doing some other stuff. One thing I might do is I might do another live stream tomorrow. It might be this episode that I do, and that'll be Wednesday's episode. And then I am going to try to, when I do a pickup shoot next Friday or this Friday, do some stuff related to that and see if I can film some of that, because I have to do a pickup for a project that I did about a month or so ago out in California. So any other questions? Going once, going twice. I think we're good. And we'll be doing more of these, and look out tomorrow for our test for camera and flask with myself, Ben Barden, and Caleb Pike. As always, visit thec47.com. If you have additional questions, you can go to the contact page and send something to me. Click to subscribe. Wrong direction. There it is. Blah. So you get notifications when stuff happens, and I can grow the channel and create more content and all of that good stuff. Signing off for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.